Is that your daughter or your assistant? The joke that unlocked a hidden past. What if the man everyone ignored had been trained to protect entire nations? And what if the only reason he stayed silent was for his daughter's sake? No one noticed the janitor at Highland Creek Martial Arts Academy. He moved like background noise, quietly, deliberately, never in the way, never in the spotlight. His name was Caleb Ross, and for most people, he was just the guy with a wrench and a mop. But that day, everything changed. Is that your daughter or your assistant? The voice cracked across the room like a whip, sharp, smug, and loud enough to make heads turn. Caleb didn't flinch. He was crouched under a rusted sink in the back corridor, elbow deep in cold water, trying to stop a leak that had been ignored for weeks. His faded work shirt was soaked, and the wrench in his hand clinked gently as he tightened the pipe. He heard the voice, and so did his daughter. Lena, 9 years old, stood just outside the dojo room, watching the martial arts class through the narrow glass window. She was small, wiry, and dressed in her school uniform, one shoelace dragging behind, and her oversized backpack sliding off one shoulder. Her eyes were wide with wonder, the kind only kids have when they see something beautiful they're not sure they're allowed to touch. "Don't block the door," said Coach Brennan, without looking at her, "unless you're planning to mop the mats after practice." A few students snickered. It wasn't loud, but it was collective, and somehow cruel. Lena shrank back a step. Caleb wiped his hands on his shirt and stood slowly, eyes scanning the room. He didn't look at Brennan. Not yet. Coach Brennan was in the center of the dojo, surrounded by students in gleaming white juris, their belts tied perfectly, their punches landing in synchronized rhythm. He never even glanced back. His words were aimed like arrows, backward but intentional. Caleb stepped next to his daughter, placed a quiet hand on her shoulder. "She wasn't blocking the door," he said softly. Now Brennan turned. "Mr. Ross," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "the observation area is for parents, not plumbing staff. We try to maintain standards here." Caleb didn't respond. He didn't move, just looked at Brennan the way a mountain looks at a storm. Coach Brennan smirked and continued, "In martial arts, we teach discipline begins with appearance. Maybe try wearing a belt. Might help those pants stay up." More laughter. A boy near the back coughed to cover his snort. A girl looked away embarrassed. Lena clutched Caleb's arm, her small fingers squeezing tight. But Caleb? He just reached down and helped her adjust her backpack, the same way he might have done 1,000 times before. Then quietly he said, "Let's go." They turned toward the hallway. But before they could take 2 steps, another voice cut through the room. Cool, deliberate, and commanding. "Coach Brennan," the voice said, "you'll apologize." Every head turned toward the staircase. Vivian Hale, co-founder of the academy, stood at the top step in a black blazer, arms crossed and eyes fixed. Her presence shifted the room like a sudden change in gravity. Coach Brennan's expression flickered. Surprise, then forced charm. "Miss Hale, I was just—" "Now would be fine," she said, walking down the stairs without missing a beat. Caleb blinked. He'd seen her before. Once, maybe twice. The kind of woman you remembered without knowing why. Sharp, polished, unreadable. "I meant no disrespect," Brennan said, clearing his throat. "Apologies, Mr. Ross." Caleb met his eyes but said nothing. "It doesn't bother me," he said, voice low. "I've heard worse." Vivian stopped beside them. "I didn't ask him to apologize for your sake," she said calmly. Then she turned toward the students. "I asked him to apologize for theirs." The room fell completely silent. Then she knelt slightly, leveling her eyes with Lena. "Do you want to learn?" she asked gently. Lena froze, then turned to her father. Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked at Brennan, who was now pretending to adjust a student's stance to avoid eye contact. Then he looked back at his daughter. "I'm just here to fix the leak," Caleb murmured. Vivian's voice was steady. "And I'm here to fix something else." She stood again, addressed the class. "Everyone take 10. Water, stretch. Coach Brennan, my office." She turned back to Caleb. "She can observe if that's all right with you." Caleb nodded once. Vivian gave a faint, almost invisible smile, then disappeared behind the office door. After a long moment, Lena whispered, "Dad, she's amazing." Caleb smiled faintly. "She's something all right." Then, almost reluctantly, he added, "But don't tell her." The belt joke was kind of funny. Lena giggled behind her hand. "I won't." "You almost laughed." "Almost," she said. And with that, they sat down at the side of the room. The class resumed. Coach Brennan's voice returned, but with a little less edge than before. And Lena, she didn't stand behind the glass anymore. She sat cross-legged on the floor, watching not as a stranger, but like someone who had just found the first crack in the door. "You know, I've always believed that strength doesn't come from raising your voice. It comes from knowing when not to. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room carries the loudest story." Caleb didn't need to prove anything to anyone that day. But what he didn't say, that's what changed everything. A white belt too big, a heart even bigger. The day she stepped in. What if the smallest person in the room had the strongest reason to stay? And what if her father's quiet past wasn't something he was hiding, but something he was protecting her from? 2 days later, the sky over Highland Creek was the color of old steel. Low clouds hovered like they were too tired to move, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Not the kind that storms, but the kind that lingers. Caleb Ross stood outside the dojo, bent down in front of his daughter. He was adjusting the sleeves of a borrowed gi, 3 sizes too big, sleeves rolled and cinched awkwardly, belt tied loosely like a last-minute gift. Lena stood still, but her knees trembled. "You don't have to do this," Caleb said quietly, almost afraid of hearing her answer. Lena looked up, chin quivering but eyes steady. "I want to." He nodded. That was it. No speeches, no pressure, just permission. Inside, the dojo was already buzzing. Soft shuffles of warm-ups, low murmurs, the scent of pine cleaner and effort. Vivian Hale stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, speaking to Sensei Takeda, the academy's co-founder, and an older man whose movements were slow but sharp. When he did speak, the room leaned in without being told. At the far end, Coach Brennan stood like a statue carved in impatience. His smile was tight, his gaze skimming the room like he was already measuring who would slow him down. As Lena stepped in, she shrank again. The room seemed louder from the inside, bigger, brighter, more judgmental. But then a girl with a long black braid and a soft smile jogged over. "You must be Lena, right?" she asked warmly. "I'm Tara, senior student. Don't worry. We all look like laundry when we first put this thing on." She winked. "Come on, I'll show you how to tie your belt without accidentally tying your arms to your legs." Lena laughed. A small one, but it was real. Tara gave Caleb a nod. "She's in good hands." He hesitated, then nodded back. Vivian stepped beside him without a word. They stood together, watching as Tara led Lena to the mat. "She has your walk," Vivian said, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb blinked. "My walk?" "That quiet kind of confidence," she said. "The kind that makes people wonder what you've survived. She walks like she belongs, even when no one told her she did." Caleb looked at his daughter. "She didn't get that from me." Vivian's gaze didn't leave the mat. "Or maybe she got it because of you." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was a bridge, one they were both still deciding whether to cross. Caleb finally spoke. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing her," he said. "For not turning her away." Vivian didn't blink. "I didn't do it out of kindness, Caleb. I did it because this place is broken, and I didn't realize how broken until I saw her face in that window." She paused, almost unsure whether to keep going. "This academy was supposed to be about growth. My husband built it that way. A place where discipline was earned, not demanded. But somewhere along the line, we traded integrity for trophies." Caleb glanced across the room. Coach Brennan was barking instructions now, drilling students with fast kicks and louder corrections. His smile returned, but only when he was winning. "He runs it like a factory," Caleb said. Vivian's voice tightened. "He gets results. Parents like medals. I like silence. Too much, apparently. I stopped listening to my gut the day I let him take over." Caleb crossed his arms. "Your gut might have needed a louder wrench." That made her laugh. Not a polite chuckle, but the kind that cracked open something tired. "You didn't even blink when he insulted you," she said. Caleb shrugged. If I'd reacted, she would have remembered that longer than the insult. Vivian nodded slowly. "That's rare. It shouldn't be." They both watched as Tara helped Lena through a series of slow stretches. The GI hung on her awkwardly, but her eyes were alive, focused, determined. "She's going to be good," Vivian whispered. "She already is," Caleb said softly. "She just doesn't know it yet." Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. "Coach Brennan wants to schedule a private demonstration, claims it'll showcase the Academy's superiority." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like he wants payback." Vivian's tone turned sharp. "Let him talk for now." "You have a plan," Caleb said. She looked at him. Really looked. "Not yet," she replied, "but I have something better." "What's that?" "I have questions I'm finally ready to ask." Caleb smiled faintly. Questions are always more dangerous than answers. Vivian stepped back, already turning toward her office. Then over her shoulder she added, "By the way, your pants don't need a belt." He grinned. "I'll let Coach Brennan know." She disappeared behind the door, and Caleb looked back at Lena. She was stumbling now, trying to keep her balance during a slow sidestep drill, but each time she fell, she stood up faster. Not out of pride, not out of fear, but because deep down, she believed she could. And for the first time in a long while, Caleb Ross felt something stir inside his chest. Not dread, not regret, but something he thought he'd buried years ago. Hope. "You're afraid to hit me?" The fight that was never about fighting. What happens when the quietest man in the room finally steps onto the mat? What if the janitor they mocked had once been a warrior who forgot what it felt like to be seen? The locker room smelled of sweat and anxiety, old tiles, metal hooks, echoes of boys who bragged and coaches who barked. But today it was quiet, too quiet. Caleb Ross stood in front of a cracked mirror, tying the belt of his old GI. It wasn't white, it wasn't black, it was a faded storm gray, creased, worn, and soft in a way only time could teach. There was no logo, no stripe, no rank, just the memory of who he used to be, and a whisper of who he might still become. "You sure about this?" Tara, the senior student, stood behind him, arms folded, concern written across her face. Caleb met her eyes in the mirror. "I'm not here for a trophy," he said. "I'm here to show my daughter. She has a seat at the table." Outside, the air buzzed. The bleachers were full. Parents murmured. Kids leaned forward on their elbows. Word had gotten around. Coach Brennan had challenged the janitor to a public demonstration. A test. A show. Maybe even a takedown. Vivian Hale had agreed. On one condition. It would be public. No behind closed doors sparring. No whispered politics. Just truth, laid bare on the mat. And now, the dojo watched. Coach Brennan stood in the center, his GI spotless, black belt tied like a badge of honor. His grin was sharp, the kind of grin you wear when you think the outcome is already written. "I didn't expect you'd show," he said loudly. "I figured you'd still be fixing toilets." Soft chuckles rippled through the audience. Vivian didn't flinch. She stood at the edge of the mat, clipboard in hand. "This is a non-combative demonstration," she said clearly. "No strikes to the head. No submissions unless verbal. Stop on command. Is that understood?" Both men nodded. "Begin." For a moment, neither moved. Caleb's stance was casual. Hands loose, shoulders relaxed. No aggression, no intimidation. Coach Brennan bounced lightly, shifting weight between his feet. Quick, fluid, sharp. His first kick came fast. A spinning hook aimed right where most men blink. But Caleb didn't blink. He simply stepped to the side. Not panicked, not flashy, just calm. Another strike, then a jab, then a side kick. Still, Caleb didn't strike back. He moved like water, like silence with a spine. The audience leaned in. On the bench near the edge, Lena sat beside Tara, fists clenched in her lap. "Why isn't he doing anything?" she whispered. Tara's voice was soft, steady. "Because he doesn't need to yet." Coach Brennan's breathing quickened. His brows furrowed. Every punch landed on air. Every kick met absence. And then, a mistake. Brennan lunged, overreaching, one leg off balance. Caleb pivoted, just once, and gently redirected Brennan's momentum with a palm to the chest. Not a strike, a redirection. Brennan stumbled, hard. His back hit the mat with a loud, flat thud. No one clapped, no one laughed. The dojo fell still. Coach Brennan growled from the floor. "You afraid to hit me?" he spat. Caleb's voice was low, calm, but it cut like a blade through the silence. "I'm afraid I might teach you something. You're not ready to learn." Gasps, murmurs. Vivian's eyes glinted, a tiny knowing shift in her expression. Brennan roared and charged again. This time less form, more fury, less strategy, more ego. Caleb met him with stillness, a shift of foot, a turn of shoulder, and then, in one smooth movement, he slipped behind Brennan, hooked his leg gently, and let gravity do the rest. Brennan hit the mat again, not with pain, with humiliation. Caleb didn't gloat, didn't pose. He simply stepped back and bowed. Vivian walked forward. Her voice was clear. "This concludes the demonstration." She turned to Brennan. "Would you like to say anything?" He sat up slowly. Sweat gleamed on his brow. His voice cracked. "No." Vivian nodded once, then turned to Caleb. "You didn't come to prove something," she said. Caleb looked at Lena, then back at Vivian. "No," he replied. "I came to show something." He paused. "That you don't have to be loud to be heard." The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. A slow, respectful clap began. One parent, then another, then more. No fanfare, just truth. Finally seen. Lena ran to her father, eyes bright. "That was amazing," she beamed. He bent down, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I didn't win anything," he said softly. "But you didn't lose yourself," she replied. "I've always believed there's a difference between silence and stillness. Silence is what you give the world when you're afraid. Stillness is what you choose when you no longer are." Caleb didn't fight to defeat. He fought to remind a room that real strength doesn't need to shout. They shut down the dojo, so we built a circle. What do you do when the system says you don't belong? You stop asking for permission and start creating your own space. It came like a punch that no one saw coming. An email. Cold. Formal. Final. Subject line. Accreditation terminated. Body. In the interest of maintaining regional martial arts standards, Highland Creek Academy will no longer be recognized as a certified training institution. That was it. No warning, no explanation, no room for appeal. By noon, the mats had been rolled up. By sunset, the doors were locked. Caleb Ross found out while replacing a broken faucet in the side restroom. He refreshed the directory app on his phone and watched, in real time, as his name disappeared from the staff list. Vivian Hale sat alone in her office, the official letter trembling in her hand. She had fought for this place, funded it, grieved inside its walls. But now, it was gone. Just like that. "They didn't even listen," she whispered. "They were never planning to," Caleb said from the doorway. She looked up. His work shirt was damp, his sleeves still rolled. But his eyes had hardened. Not from defeat, but from decision. "This isn't about us anymore," she said. "This is about every kid who walked through that door thinking they were safe." Caleb walked to the main room. The floor was bare now, stripped of mats, stripped of noise, stripped of meaning. He picked up a forgotten white belt left on a bench, turned it in his hands. "This thing used to scare me more than any battlefield," he said. Vivian blinked. "Why?" "Because out there," he nodded to the world beyond the windows, "I knew what I was fighting. Here, I had to face myself." They stood in silence. Then Vivian walked toward the back maintenance wing, where old storage rooms had collected dust for years. She pushed open a creaky metal door. Inside, cracked tile, flickering light, cobwebs, exposed wires, no mats, no mirrors. "Perfect," she said. Caleb raised an eyebrow. You planning to haunt this place? She turned to him. Her voice was clear. Number, I'm planning to save it. Not as a dojo, not with ranks, not with belts, but as a circle. A circle? No hierarchy, no spotlight, just presence. Just people who show up again and again, until fear runs out of breath. Caleb stepped into the room, ran a hand along the cold cement wall. You know this is probably illegal, he muttered. Vivian smirked. You were in the Navy. I think we can survive a code violation. That weekend they met. No posters, no announcements, just word of mouth. 6 students, 2 parents, 1 worn-out space, and hearts full of fire. Vivian stood in the center. We're not here to earn ranks, she said. We're here to reclaim rhythm. She turned to Caleb. He stepped forward, barefoot on cold tile. Bow not to me, he said. Bow to the part of you that showed up, when staying home would have been easier. They bowed. And just like that, a new dojo was born, not in structure, but in spirit. She can't stand, but they all stood for her, the day the circle became a movement. What if the little girl they laughed at became the reason an entire town stood still? What if a janitor's daughter redefined what strength looked like and made a system bow to something greater than status? The snow came quietly that morning, not a storm, just soft spirals falling like feathers from the sky. Inside the borrowed community hall, the air buzzed with something that felt sacred, not nervous, not chaotic, but present. Kids in mismatched GIs lined up around the mats. Parents shuffled in folding chairs. Someone set up a table of warm drinks. Someone else brought string lights, taping them gently around the edge of the room, like hope in soft bulbs. At the center sat Lena, her wheelchair angled toward the mat. Her GI was fresh, tailored, her name stitched over the heart in gentle gray thread. Her belt? A pale slate blue, created by Caleb and Vivian themselves. It wasn't part of any ranking system, but it meant something deeper than any black belt ever could. It meant, I'm still here. Caleb knelt beside her, holding something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it slowly. A new belt. Deep gray, almost storm-colored. A shade made for those who had walked through something and come out the other side. This one, he said, isn't recognized by any official system. He paused, looked at her. But neither is courage. The room was quiet. He tied it gently around her waist. You've shown more heart in these last few months than some people show in a lifetime. You're not less because you fell. You're more because you chose to rise. Lena's eyes brimmed, but she didn't cry. She just whispered, does it still count if I can't stand? Caleb smiled softly. Sweetheart, they're all standing for you. She looked around, and they were. The entire room, every student, every parent, every instructor, had risen from their seats, not out of protocol, but out of reverence. Later that day, Vivian Hale walked to the center of the mat, carrying a small wooden box. She opened it slowly, carefully. Inside was a circular pin, bronze, hand-engraved, a phoenix rising from a coiled belt. My husband designed this before he passed, she said. He never got to award it to anyone. Until now. She stepped forward and pinned it gently onto Caleb's sleeve. This isn't a title, she said. It's a thank you. For showing up when everything told you not to. For teaching us what strength really means. Caleb blinked. He looked at her. This woman who once built a dojo from ambition and was now rebuilding one from soul. You didn't just save this place, she whispered. You saved me. A hush fell. And then Master Takeda, silent until now, stepped forward with a canvas scroll. Blank, white, waiting. Instead of certificates, Vivian said, we're making a map. Of everyone who's passed through here. Not ranked, just remembered. They passed out paintbrushes. One by one, the students stepped forward, pressing their handprints onto the scroll. Some wrote names, some just left color. When it was Lena's turn, she wheeled forward and looked at Caleb. I want to use my foot, she said. He smiled, helped her carefully remove one sock. Together they pressed her cast, still wrapped in protective padding, into the ink, then stamped it gently onto the fabric. Above it, she wrote, in crooked but determined letters, "Still kicking." The room laughed, then cried, then clapped. Not the kind of clapping you do at the end of a recital. The kind you do when something real happens. A week later, a letter arrived from the Regional Martial Arts Board. Official, cold, again. Your appeal has been denied. Your new structure is non-compliant with curriculum expectations. You are permanently decertified. Vivian read it once, then again, then slowly tore it into 4 even pieces. Across the hall, Caleb sat with Lena, showing her how to adjust a student's stance from her chair. "Coaching doesn't mean controlling," he said. "It means noticing." Vivian walked over, handed him the torn letter. He looked at it, looked at her. "Do you care?" she asked. He shook his head. "I care about her. I care about this." Vivian exhaled. "Then we're still winning." That weekend, the circle gathered again. The canvas scroll was displayed on the back wall. More handprints, more ink, more names. And in the center, someone had painted words in bold black. "A belt doesn't make you unbreakable. It proves you already were." This isn't a story about karate, or belts, or revenge. This is a story about what happens when one man refuses to be invisible, and instead becomes invincible by choosing love, restraint, and truth. If you felt something while watching this, you're part of the circle now too. And if you've ever been told you don't belong, I hope you remember Lena's words. "Does it still count if I can't stand?" The answer is yes, especially when the whole world stands for you.